Hey there, today we're going to talk about the turnaround. The turnaround happens in bars 11 and 12 of the blues, and it's designed to literally turn you back around at the beginning. So it's designed to kind of set up the next 12 bars of the blues. We're going to talk about 4 examples of common turnarounds, and I want you to practice those. The first example is literally just adding a 5 chord on the 12th bar. So that's pretty much the simplest example I can think of. So if we're coming from like a blues in B, something like that, right? And that would look something like, we'll do a little comp rhythm too. We'll do something like, and then we're back to the beginning of the blues. All right? You could do that in the minor key as well. Okay. Next example is very common in slower blueses, kind of like 12/8 blueses, and that's going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord to the 1 chord and the 5 chord. And very common practice is to actually walk up, so like E, and then walk back down to the 1 chord, and then back to the 5 chord, down to the 5 chord. And a kind of more elegant way of doing that is by moving the left hand with tenths, like that. Okay, and that works both in major and minor again. So that will be something like, alright, and then in the minor, yeah, the 5 chord is always major. Alright, next example is the classic blues turnaround. This is the one that you're going to probably see the most often, and this is one of the hardest ones. So this one is kind of a similar structure as the one before, actually, like in that you have an E chord, and then you have an A chord, and then an E chord, and then a B chord, I think, like a 1/4, 1/5 kind of thing. But it's going to be really hard to think about it like that. The kind of way that you want to think about it, you want to think about it in 2 parts. This one uses a really nice counterpoint. So what's going to happen is the left hand is going to spend the first bar walking up to the 5, and the right hand is going to spend the first bar walking down. So the left hand will skip to the 3rd and then go up chromatically to the 5. So it'll approach chromatically, and the right hand will also jump down to the 7 and approach chromatically. So if you start at the 5 and go outwards, you can figure out, kind of like backwards, calculate how you're going to get to the 5. So you start with the E, and that's how that first part will go. So make sure that you're thinking about it like that. And that's bar 12 now, the top of bar 12. And then instead of just playing a 5 chord, what's really common is to actually play a 6 chord that leads down to the 5 chord, just like in the minor blues, but also in the major blues. So again, using these kind of shell voicings with the added note, that would be the voicing I would recommend. So make sure that you know your 5 chord before. Practice going chromatically above and then to the 5 chord, and then practice getting to the 5 note, and then put those together. So in the blues it'll be something like yeah, this one doesn't really work well in the minor key. You could extend to the minor key. In which case you would have kind of, I don't know, interesting chords. But yeah, that's not very common, so don't worry about doing this one in the minor key. The one thing that I also want you to do with this one though is I want you to use it also as an ending to the blues for now. So because we haven't really talked about how we end the blues. So what we want to do instead of, so we're still going to go the same way to the 5 like that, but instead of using the 5 chord, we're going to use that same chromatic gesture but to the 1 chord. So if this is our 1 chord, like our shell with an added note, that's the voicing I recommend too, with the 9 on the top. It's the most kind of standard one. Then we're going to play 1 semitone above, like that. So make sure you work on that. You have those notes in your mind, in your ear, in your fingers, and then you play the turnaround. And now that's an ending to the blues, which sounds really great. A good way to end your blues. All right. The last example might not be the best thing to do in certain settings, but in a jazz blues it's totally appropriate. But it's the jazz turnaround, and that's kind of an intro to the jazz blues, which we'll talk about in another time. But what's essentially happening is we just have a more complicated chord progression, where we go from the 1 chord to the 6 chord to the 2 chord to the 5 chord. But actually, all of these chords are going to be 7 chords. So this chord will be E7, this chord will be C sharp 7, this chord will be F sharp 7. Don't worry about playing that all together. And then this chord will be B7, and like that. So that's kind of what we'll do for the jazz turnaround for now. So it's going to sound kind of weird jumping from this kind of blues shuffle into this jazz stride kind of thing, but that's what we'll do for now. And that one also works in the minor. Minor 6, C sharp half diminished, F sharp. Yeah, that would be E minor 6, C sharp half diminished 7, F sharp half diminished 7. You don't play the 5th, so it doesn't really matter. And then B7. Okay, so that's quite a bit of information, quite a bit of turnarounds to practice, but I want you to try those in a few different keys, both major and minor, but practice them nice and slowly, and every time you play the blues, I want you to start with a turnaround, and that will get you into the right rhythm, and it will help kind of just learn this turnaround.